She was laughing when he walked in. Not a polite laugh. Not the careful, measured kind women sometimes performed for rooms full of important men. This was the real thing. Loud, unrestrained, head thrown back, one hand slapping the table. The kind of laugh that made strangers smile without knowing why. Kwon Ji-ho stood at the entrance of the Okonkwo family parlor and felt something shift behind his sternum. He ignored it immediately. "Mr. Kwon!" Her brother Chidi rose from the sofa, hand extended, smile calibrated to the exact warmth of a man who wanted something. "Welcome, please, sit. Adaise! Adaise!" She turned, and just like that, the laugh folded away. Her face didn't go cold, it went composed, professional. The kind of transition that told Ji-ho this woman knew exactly how to manage a room. "Mr. Kwon," she stood, extended her hand. Her grip was firm. "Adaise Okonkwo." "Kwon Ji-ho." He shook it once, released. "You're younger than I expected." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You're colder than I expected." I suppose we're both surprised. Chidi laughed too loudly. Ji-ho said nothing. They sat across from each other at the dining table with a contract between them. 12 pages, 3 clauses, 1 purpose. 6 months of shared address, shared appearance at public events, shared last name if required. In return, $15 million transferred in 2 installments. Clean, simple, businesslike. Ji-ho had done harder negotiations. "You've reviewed the terms?" he asked. Twice. She turned to page 9 and tapped a clause. This section, the social media clause. "You want joint posts twice a week minimum? That's excessive. I'll do 1. The immigration algorithm flags sparse digital presence in couples under 40. 2 posts is the minimum for credibility. Then make them count. Quality over quantity." She met his eyes. "I'm not performing a relationship for strangers online. I'm performing one for an immigration officer. That's the job." Ji-ho studied her for a moment. "Fine. 2 posts, but you control the content." "Thank you." She flipped to the final page, picked up the pen, and paused. Something moved across her face, brief, almost invisible, a shadow of something she was deciding not to say. Then it passed, and she signed. Ji-ho signed beneath her name. Chidi poured champagne, nobody drank. The apartment in Victoria Island was large and cold in the way expensive things sometimes were. All glass and clean lines, no warmth, no mess. Ji-ho had rented it for the duration. 2 bedrooms, 1 shared living space, 1 set of rules posted on the refrigerator in both English and Korean, because Ji-ho was a man who believed in clarity. Adaze read the list when she arrived with her 2 suitcases and 1 large plant she refused to leave behind. "You scheduled quiet hours?" she said. 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. I have early calls with Seoul. I have early creativity. I don't schedule that. She moved to the 2nd bedroom, dragging her larger suitcase. The plant goes in the living room. It blocks the light panel. It needs the light panel. She set it down in front of the floor-to-ceiling window without asking again. Ji-ho looked at the plant, looked at her, said nothing. She was already in her room. The first 2 weeks were archaeology. 2 people carefully learning the shape of each other's edges without touching them. Ji-ho woke at 5:30, made black coffee, and worked in silence until 8. Adaze woke at 6:45, made tea with so much condensed milk it barely qualified, and sketched at the dining table while music played low from her earphones. Always Afrobeats. Always something with drums that made the apartment feel inhabited. They shared meals twice a week, by contract requirement. These were the strangest hours. "Do you always eat this fast?" she asked on the 4th dinner. "I have a 7 o'clock call." "You have a 7 o'clock call every night." "I run a company across a 9-hour time difference." She tilted her head. "Do you ever just sit? Without a purpose?" He looked at her like she'd asked something in a language he'd never studied. "No." "That's It's efficient. Those are opposites, you know. She picked up her fork again. A person can be both sad and efficient. Most workaholics are. He didn't respond, but he also didn't leave for his call until 8:15 that night. He didn't acknowledge this. Neither did she. It was the end of week 3 when she heard the first one. She wasn't eavesdropping. She was passing the hallway to the kitchen for water. Past midnight, the apartment dark, except for the light under his office door. His voice came through low, but distinct. He was on the phone with someone in Seoul. She slowed. In Korean, he said, "She's not what I expected." Adeze stopped breathing. She's not soft. She's not trying to impress anyone. She just exists, like she has the right to take up space. I don't see that often. A pause. Someone speaking on the other end. No, it's not like that. It's just the apartment feels different when she's in it, even when she's quiet. I don't know what to do with that. Adeze stood in the dark hallway for 7 full seconds. Then she walked to the kitchen, got her water, went back to bed. She lay on her back in the dark, eyes open, heart doing something complicated and inconvenient. He doesn't know I speak Korean. The thought sat on her chest like a stone. He doesn't know. She made a decision somewhere between midnight and 1 a.m. that she couldn't fully explain to herself. She would not tell him. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Because for the first time in her life, she was watching someone be honest. Not performing for her, not trying to win her. He was just unraveling in a language he thought she couldn't hear. And she wanted to see where that led. She wanted to watch him choose him freely. All right, if you're already hooked, drop a fire in the comments. We're just getting started. The immigration office called on a Tuesday. Jiho was in the middle of a call with his CFO when the Lagos State Immigration Service number flashed across his second phone. He ended the call mid-sentence, something his CFO had never seen in 6 years of working together. Mr. Kwan. The officer's voice was pleasant in the way sharpened knives were pleasant, smooth and dangerous. This is Officer Balagoon, Residency Compliance Unit. We'd like to schedule a joint interview with you and your wife. Standard procedure for investor residency applications. How does Friday suit you both? Friday is fine, Jiho said. His voice didn't crack. He hung up and sat very still for 40 seconds. Then he walked to Adeyize's studio corner. She'd converted half the second bedroom into a drafting space, and knocked once. Come in. She was bent over her drafting table, pencil moving in long, confident strokes across an elevation drawing. She didn't look up. If it's about the quiet hours, I'll remind you it's 2:30 in the afternoon. Immigration called. We have a joint interview on Friday. The pencil stopped. She straightened slowly and turned. Something crossed her face. Not panic, but a rapid internal calculation he was beginning to recognize. She processed fast. He respected it against his will. How joint? She asked. Separate rooms, same questions. They compare answers. Okay. She set the pencil down. Sit. He blinked. What? Sit down, Jiho. We have 2 days. We need to know each other well enough to convince someone whose entire job is spotting liars. She pulled a second stool from beneath her drafting table and nodded at it. Sit. Something about the way she said his name, not Mr. Kwan, not the formal distance she'd maintained for 3 weeks, made him sit without arguing. First question, she said. What side of the bed do you sleep on? Right. I sleep on the left. Good, no conflict. She grabbed a notepad. Favorite food you've eaten in Lagos so far? He thought. Pepper soup, the one you made last week. She looked up. A small beat passed between them. You noticed I made that? I notice most things. He said it without thinking. And then, because he was Jiho, and he didn't know how to be anything but composed, he added, for efficiency. She wrote something down. He suspected it wasn't about the pepper soup. They spent 4 hours that evening building a shared story. His mother's name, her father's village, the fake first date, a restaurant near Echo Hotel. She chose it, they both agreed. The first argument, about the plant, they both said at the same time, and then looked at each other with matching surprise. That was real, she said. Yes. He almost smiled. Almost. It was. At some point she made tea. Not for him, she wasn't performing. But when she returned, she placed a second cup on the table beside him without comment. He drank it. It had too much condensed milk. He didn't say this. They worked until past midnight. At one point she fell asleep briefly, head dropping toward her folded arms on the dining table, notepad still in hand. Jiho sat across from her and did something he would not have admitted to anyone in Seoul. He watched her sleep for 60 seconds. Her face was different when she wasn't managing it. Softer, younger. There was a small scar on her left jaw he hadn't noticed before, and her eyelashes were longer than they seemed when her eyes were open and guarded. He looked away, opened his laptop, typed nothing for several minutes. Friday came with Harmattan dust and a Lagos traffic jam that made them 12 minutes late to the immigration office. Jiho had never been late to anything in his adult life. He sat in the back of the car with his jaw tight. Adeze watched him from the corner of her eye. Breathe, she said quietly. I am breathing. You're doing that thing where you breathe but don't actually take in air. Your shoulders are at your ears. He consciously dropped his shoulders. Said nothing.
The interview rooms were beige and efficient. Officer Balagun was a small woman in her 40s with reading glasses she kept taking off and putting back on, and eyes that had heard every lie Lagos had to offer. She interviewed Jiho first. How did you meet your wife? Through mutual business contacts, a dinner in Victoria Island. Who spoke first? He paused one beat. She would have. She did. She told me I looked like I needed to sit down. Officer Balagun wrote something. What does she do first in the morning? Makes tea. Too much condensed milk. She sketches while it cools. Another note. Does she sing? He hadn't expected that question. He almost faltered, and then remembered, suddenly, that yes, she did. Low and absent-minded while she worked. Something in Igbo he didn't have words for, but had heard enough times to hum. Yes, he said. Quietly. She doesn't realize she's doing it. Balagun looked at him over her glasses for a long moment. Mr. Kwan, she said, in my experience, men who marry for convenience remember the documentation. Men who marry for real remember the singing. She closed her folder. You're done. Send your wife in. Adeze walked out of her session 20 minutes later. Jiho was standing in the corridor. He looked at her face, trying to read it. How was it? She asked. She asked what cologne you wear. What did you say? Something cedar, with something underneath I haven't named yet. She said it completely matter-of-factly, like she was reading from the notepad, but she didn't meet his eyes. He was quiet for a moment. That's accurate. I know. She started toward the exit. Come on, I'm hungry, and I refuse to be interrogated on an empty stomach twice in one day. He followed her. And somewhere in the space between the immigration office and the car, something shifted between them. Not dramatically, not with music or rain or any of the things stories usually required. Just a quiet rearrangement, like furniture that had been slightly wrong and was now, without announcement, in the right place. Hey, if Officer Balagun caught you off guard, you're not alone. Drop a comment and stay tuned so you don't miss what happens next.
Mrs. Park Suni arrived in Lagos on a Saturday with 2 extra suitcases, a box of Korean snacks Jiho hadn't asked for, and the kind of warmth that made rooms feel smaller in the best possible way. Adeze opened the door and found herself immediately pulled into a hug by a woman she'd never met. "Aiko, you're so beautiful," Suni said in Korean, holding Adeze at arm's length to look at her properly. "And tall! Jiho didn't say you were tall. Jiho never says anything useful." Adeze understood every word. She smiled carefully. "Thank you. You must be his aunt. Please come in. I made tea." Suni switched to English immediately, easy and warm. "Tea! She made tea, Jiho! See? This is what a home feels like. Do you remember what a home feels like?" Jiho appeared from the hallway, took his aunt's heaviest bag without greeting, and said, "Why didn't you tell me you were coming?" "Because you would have prepared," Suni said, sitting herself at the dining table like she'd always lived there. "I wanted to see the real thing, not the performance." Jiho's eyes moved briefly to Adazy. Adazy was arranging teacups and pretending she hadn't noticed. Suni stayed for 5 days. In those 5 days, she rewired something in the apartment's atmosphere that neither Jiho nor Adazy could name or prevent. She cooked Korean food and asked Adazy to teach her the pepper soup recipe. She reorganized the bookshelf by color because it's more beautiful this way. Who needs to find books fast? She fell asleep on the sofa watching Nigerian movies and asked Adazy to explain every plot twist twice. She treated the marriage like it was real. And the dangerous thing, the quietly devastating thing, was that the more she did, the more Jiho and Adazy behaved like it was. On the third evening, Suni went to bed early. Jiho and Adazy sat on the balcony in the Lagos night heat, the city spread out below them. And for the first time since they'd signed the contract, neither of them had anything to perform. No immigration officer, no social media post, no audience. Just them. "She's wonderful," Adazy said. "She's exhausting," Jiho said. "Those aren't opposites." She turned to look at him with half a smile. "You said that to me once." He looked surprised. Then something happened that Adazy had not seen in 8 weeks of sharing space with this man. Kwon Jiho almost laughed. Not fully, just the beginning of it, the infrastructure of a laugh, before he caught it and pressed it back down. But she saw it. She filed it away like an architect filing a structural revelation. "She seems to love you very much," Adazy said, softer now. "She loves everyone," loudly. He looked out at the city. "It's not personal." "I think it is. I think you mean a lot to her, and you don't know what to do with that." Silence. "I'm an architect," she continued, not looking at him. "I study structures. Load-bearing walls, foundation points, the things buildings are actually standing on versus the things that just look important." A pause. "You put up a lot of walls, but I'm starting to see where the real ones are." He turned to look at her. She was still looking at the city. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked. "Because Soon Yi loves you, and you love her. And I think you've been so committed to not needing people that you've convinced yourself you don't." She picked up her glass. "That's all. I'm not asking you to do anything about it." Jiho sat with that for a long time. The city hummed below them. "My mother left when I was 11, he said. He didn't plan to say it. It arrived like something that had been waiting at the door. She didn't leave angry. She didn't leave in a scene. She just wasn't there one morning. And my father said she had her reasons and went to work. And that was the whole conversation we ever had about it." Adazy didn't move, didn't look at him. She understood with perfect instinct that this was the kind of thing you received without reaction, the way you caught something fragile. "I have a voice note from her," Jiho said, "on my phone. She sent it the year I turned 28. I've never played it." "Why not?" Long pause. "Because whatever it says, either it explains why she left, and I have to live with understanding her, or it doesn't, and I have to live with not mattering enough for an explanation." He stopped. "I don't know which is worse." Adaise finally turned to look at him. He was staring at his hands. The composed, architectural CEO who'd walked into her family parlor 8 weeks ago with a contract and nothing else. And right now, in this city night, he looked like a man who had been carrying something heavy for 23 years and had simply gotten tired. "Jiho," she said quietly. He looked up. "You matter." She said it plainly, the way she said everything, without decoration. That's not an opinion. It's a structural fact. He looked at her for a long, unguarded moment. And then Suni burst back onto the balcony with snacks she'd apparently not actually been sleeping to get. "Aigo, why are you both so serious? Lagos night is beautiful! Someone put on music." The moment closed like a door. But it had happened, and both of them knew it. Chidi called Adaise on a Wednesday afternoon. "Come and see me. I'm at the office."
His office was a large table at the back of a restaurant in Surulere that he'd claimed as semi-permanent territory for the better part of a decade. Two men she didn't recognize sat at the adjacent table in the particular stillness of men paid to be still. Adaise sat across from her brother and looked at him the way she always had, with love that had never fully stopped even when he made it difficult. "Talk," she said. "How's the arrangement?" He poured water for both of them without asking. "The Korean." "The marriage, you mean?" "It's fine." "Fine." He smiled with his mouth. "That's a word that covers a lot. What do you want, Chidi?" He leaned forward. "I've been approached. Someone who knows about the contract. They want details, the original terms, the payment structure, in exchange for money. Good money."
Adaise went very still. "I haven't given them anything," Chidi said quickly. "I'm telling you first. But Ada," he dropped his voice, "you need to understand what's at stake here. If this goes to immigration before the 6 months are up, both of you face fraud charges. Your firm gets flagged, everything you've built." "Who approached you?" He looked away briefly. "Does it matter?" "Chidi." Her voice was quiet, hard, and very clear. "Does someone already have something? Have you already—" "I haven't given them anything," he said again. She studied his face. Chidi was many things: morally flexible, financially desperate, occasionally ruthless. But he was a bad liar around Adaise, and he'd always known it. "How much?" she asked. "Ada, how much did they offer you?" He was quiet. 8 million naira, he finally said. "The first payment was—" He stopped. The silence that followed had weight. "The first payment," she said. He didn't look at her. Adaise sat back in her chair. She felt something cold move through her. Not anger, not yet. Something more fundamental. A kind of grief that arrived before you'd fully lost the thing. He already took the first payment. "You came here to warn me," she said slowly, working it out. "Or you came to give me a chance to make a counteroffer. I came because you're my sister. You came because something in you hasn't fully committed to burning me down yet." She picked up her bag. "Don't confuse hesitation with loyalty, Chidi. Adaise, I need to think." She stood. "Don't do anything for 3 days. Please." She walked out of the restaurant into the hot Lagos afternoon, and she did not cry. She was her mother's daughter enough to keep the tears internal. But she sat in her car for 11 minutes before she could make herself start the engine. Then she drove home. Home. She noticed she'd thought it before she could stop herself. She didn't tell Jiho. She told herself it was because she needed to handle Chidi herself. She told herself she was protecting the arrangement. She told herself many things in the 3 days following. All of them technically true, and none of them the full truth. The full truth was this. Somewhere between the balcony conversation and Officer Balagoon and the cedar cologne she'd named out loud without meaning to, she'd stopped thinking of Jiho as the contract, and that terrified her more than Chidi did. Jiho noticed something was wrong on the second day. He said nothing the first day. He gave people room. It was one of the few forms of emotional intelligence his professional life had preserved. But on the second evening, when she pushed her food around for 20 minutes without eating, he set down his chopsticks. "What happened?" She looked up. "Nothing. You haven't sketched in 2 days. You sketch when you're happy and when you're stressed. When you're neither, you go quiet." He paused. "You're quiet." She stared at him. "I notice things," he said, quietly. "Not just for efficiency." It was the closest he'd come to referencing their balcony conversation. She recognized it as significant. She filed it. Then she made a decision. "My brother is in trouble," she said. "Half true. Half the actual story. Financial. It's affecting me. I'm handling it." Jiho studied her. "Do you need money?" "No." "Do you need—" "I need 3 more days and then I'll be fine. I just need you to let me handle it." A pause. "Okay," he said.
she blinked. She'd expected resistance, a CEO's need to solve, to fix, to take over. Instead, he just, okay.
That's it? She asked. You said you're handling it. I believe you. Something in her chest did something she didn't have an architectural term for. Thank you, she said, quietly. He picked up his chopsticks. Eat, he said. The food is getting cold. That night, she heard him on the phone again. She wasn't passing the hallway this time. She was sitting on the kitchen counter with a glass of water, unable to sleep, when his office door opened and his voice drifted down the corridor. In Korean, low and private. I don't know what's happening to me, Hyunsu. I keep watching her. Not because she's beautiful, though she is, but because she's the only person I've met in years who isn't trying to get something from me. She just exists next to me. Like she doesn't need me to be anything. A pause. His friend's voice too distant to make out. I know what the contract is. I wrote it. He stopped. I know. Another pause. I think I'm in trouble, he said. A daisy sat on the kitchen counter in the dark. Her eyes were closed. She pressed her hand flat against her chest, like she was trying to hold something in. She understood everything he said. She stayed silent. Because for the first time in her life, she wanted to watch someone choose her freely. But freedom, she was beginning to understand, had a cost. And Chidi was spending it. The brother did what? Okay, I need you to subscribe right now because this gets messier before it gets beautiful. Soon-Yi called Jiho on a Thursday morning from Seoul. He was at his desk, 3 laptops open, conference call on mute. He picked up immediately. He always picked up for her. How is she? Soon-Yi asked. No preamble. Soon-Yi never used preamble. He stopped. Started again. She's managing something. I don't know what. She won't say. And you're respecting that? Yes. Good boy. A pause. Jiho-ya, I need to tell you something. I've been holding it too long, and it's not fair to you anymore. He felt something shift in his body, a low, primal alertness. What is it? Your mother, Soon-Yi said. He went completely still. She's in Busan. She has been for 4 years. Before that, she was in Vancouver. She was sick, Jiho. She didn't leave because she stopped loving you. She left because she was ashamed of being sick, and she didn't know how to let your father love her through it. And she made a terrible, terrible choice. Soon-Yi's voice was steady, but he could hear the years behind it. I found her 6 years ago. She asked me not to tell you until you were ready. Silence. She sends me updates. She knows about Quantech. She knows you became what you became. A quiet pause. She's very proud and very sorry. Both things are true. Jiho sat in his Lagos office with 3 muted screens and a conference call still running, and something enormous happening in his chest that he had no language for. The voice note, he said. Yes. Play it, Jiho. You're ready now. A pause. I think she sent you there. I think you needed to meet a woman who stays before you could hear what your mother needed to say. He hung up. He sat for a long time. Then he got up, walked to the living room, and stood at the window looking out at Lagos, the sprawling, chaotic, improbable city that had somehow become the place where something in him was being disassembled and remade. He opened his phone, found the voice note, pressed play. His mother's voice, older than he remembered, softer, filled the space. Jiho-ya, I know I have no right to ask you to hear this. I'll say it anyway. I was sick.
The kind of sick that makes you ashamed before you're afraid. I thought leaving was protecting you. I was wrong. I know now that the greatest wound I could give a child was to let him think he wasn't worth staying for. You are worth staying for. You were worth everything. I'm sorry it took me this long to say it out loud. The note ended. Jiho stood at the window with Lagos behind him. He did not cry. He was his father's son in that way still. But he stood there for a very long time. When Adeyeze came home at 6, she found him sitting at the dining table. No laptop, no phone, just sitting, hands flat on the table, looking at nothing. She stopped in the doorway. She'd seen Jiho in every mode she'd cataloged over 4 months. Professional, muted, cautiously warm, briefly unguarded. She'd never seen him look like this. Like something had been removed, that he hadn't known was there. She set her bag down quietly, went to the kitchen, came back with 2 cups of tea, too much condensed milk in hers, slightly less in his, because she'd been paying attention, and sat down across from him. She didn't ask. He spoke anyway. I played the voice note. She wrapped her hands around her cup. And? She was sick. She thought leaving was mercy. He paused. She was wrong. But I understand why she thought so. Adeyeze said nothing. She waited. Which was its own kind of language. I've spent 23 years building a version of myself that doesn't need anyone to stay, he said. It's a very effective version. Successful. Controlled. His jaw moved. Empty. Jiho. I know what I am in this apartment, he said. His voice was careful, precise, a man choosing words like he was walking across ice. I know what we signed. I'm not confusing the contract. He looked at her finally. But I want you to know that this, whatever this has been, these 4 months, it's the most real thing that has happened to me in a very long time. Adeyeze looked at him across the table. Her heart was doing something enormous and irresponsible. Jiho, she started. And then her phone rang. Chidi. She closed her eyes for 1 second, opened them, picked up. Not now, Chidi. Ada, listen to me. It's done. They leaked it. The contract. They sent it to immigration and 2 press contacts. I tried to stop it. I swear to God, I tried. His voice was cracked, desperate. The voice of a man who'd watched a decision he'd half made destroy something he loved. I told them no final payment. I gave them the first money back, but they'd already... When? An hour ago. She lowered the phone. Jiho was watching her face, and because he'd learned to read her the way she'd always read others, he knew. How long? He said quietly. She looked at him. An hour. Something moved through his face. Not anger. Something more complex. Betrayal and calculation arriving simultaneously. He was already thinking 3 moves ahead. She could see it. Who? She hesitated. Adeyeze. His voice was very quiet. Who? Chidi, she said. The name landed in the room like something thrown from a height. Your brother, he said. Yes. He sat with that. She watched him decide not to say what he wanted to say first, and choose something more useful instead. How much time do we have before immigration acts on it? 48 hours, maybe? If the press publishes first, less. He stood, picked up his phone, put it down again, ran one hand through his hair,
the most undone she'd ever seen him physically. Then he looked at her. I need to think. Give me 2 hours. Jiho. 2 hours. Not cold. Not a command. A request from a man who needed space to be honest with himself before he could be honest with her. Please. She nodded. He went to his room. Drop a heartbreak in the comments if you felt that betrayal. And subscribe. We are not letting you miss the next 48 hours. The 2 hours became 3. Adaize sat in her studio corner, not sketching. She had her drafting pencil in her hand, but the paper stayed blank. A rare condition that only arrived when something was too large to translate into lines and angles. She thought about her mother.
Her mother, who had loved loudly and chosen badly, and spent 30 years performing devotion for men who treated her presence like furniture, necessary but unremarkable. Adaize had promised herself young that she would never do that, never perform, never beg, never make herself smaller to fit someone else's blueprint. And here she was, in an apartment that felt like home, waiting for a man to decide what she was worth. No, she set down the pencil. Not this time. She stood, knocked on his door. Come in. He was standing at the window, his thinking position. She'd cataloged this too. The city was going dark outside, Lagos oranging up for the night. I need to say something, she said, before you tell me what you've decided. He turned. I speak Korean, she said. The silence that followed had a texture. Jiho looked at her. I have, since before we met. I've been speaking it quietly for 2 years. I learned it for architecture, the design philosophy. I didn't lead with it because it wasn't relevant to the contract. She held his gaze. And then you started talking on the phone. His expression was doing something she couldn't fully read. Processing. Recalculating. The first time, she said, you said the apartment felt different when I was in it. You said you didn't know what to do with that. He was very still. The second time, her voice stayed steady. She refused to let it crack. You told your friend you were in trouble. A long silence. I didn't tell you, she said. Not because I was playing a game. Because I wanted, for once in my life, to see someone be honest when they thought no one was watching. She paused. I wanted to see if you'd choose me without knowing I could hear you. Adaize. I'm not finished. She pressed her hands flat against her sides. I have spent my whole life watching women in my family love people who needed to be convinced to stay. I promised I'd never do that. But I have also spent 4 months watching you, the real you, not the CEO, not the contract, and I need you to know that what I've seen is worth choosing. She exhaled. I just needed it to be your choice, freely, not because you were caught. Jiho crossed the room. He stopped 2 feet from her, close enough that she could smell the cedar, close enough that his face was fully visible, and for once, he wasn't managing it. I wrote the contract, he said. His voice was low. I entered this as a transaction, and somewhere in the middle of it, in the pepper soup and the too much condensed milk tea and Officer Balagoon and the balcony, the transaction stopped, and I didn't notice until I was already somewhere I'd never been. Gio? I'm not finished either. Something almost like a smile moved at the corner of his mouth. I was going to come out and tell you that I want to make this real. Not because of the leak, not because of the 48 hours. Because I played that voice note today, and my mother said the worst thing a parent can do is let a child believe they weren't worth staying for. He paused. I have spent my whole life not staying, not letting anyone stay. He looked at her. I don't want to do that anymore. The room was very quiet. There's still a leak, Adaize said finally. Her voice was slightly less steady now. Yes. And 48 hours?
Yes, he was still looking at her. But that's a logistics problem. I'm quite good at those. She exhaled, something between a breath and a laugh. You cannot CEO your way out of immigration fraud. Watch me. He reached out, slowly, carefully, giving her every opportunity to step back, and tucked a loose braid behind her ear. His hand stilled at her jaw. But first, I need to know if we're doing this. She held his gaze for a long moment. We're doing this, she said. Jiho made 4 calls in the next 6 hours. The first was to his Lagos attorney, a sharp woman named Funke, who'd handled his business registration and who operated on the philosophy that every problem was a poorly framed opportunity. He explained the situation without omitting anything. The contract exists, Funke said. But here's the beautiful complexity. Nigerian law doesn't void a marriage because it began as an arrangement, provided both parties entered it freely and it has been consummated in legal terms, meaning cohabitation, shared finances, public representation. We have all 3, Jiho said. Then what you have isn't a fraudulent marriage. What you have is a marriage that started with a contract and evolved. A pause. Love marriages that stay are rarer than arranged ones that grow. The law, interestingly, agrees with this. What about the leak? The leak shows a contract. It doesn't show fraud. Your job in the next 48 hours is to get ahead of the narrative. Don't hide, don't deny. Tell the story better than whoever leaked it. Jiho hung up and stood in the kitchen, thinking. The second call was to a Daisy. She was in the next room. He called her anyway. I need you to trust me for the next 48 hours, he said, through the phone. She was quiet for a moment on the other end. Have I stopped? He didn't have an answer for that. He hung up before she could hear something embarrassing in his breathing. The third call was the hardest. He called Chidi. It rang 4 times. Then, Jiho. Chidi's voice was rougher than a Daisy had described. The voice of a man who hadn't slept. I'm not calling to threaten you, Jiho said. I'm calling because your sister is the person I'm building a future with, which means you're someone I need to deal with honestly. He paused. You took money to destroy something that matters to her. I need to understand why. Silence. Because I've never been the one who wins, Chidi finally said. The rawness of it was startling. Ada wins. Always. And I love her. I swear I love her. But I've spent my whole life being the less successful, less loved, less chosen. His voice cracked. When someone offered me the chance to be the one holding power for once, I took it before I thought it through. Jiho listened. He recognized something in the texture of it. The particular loneliness of a person who'd spent years performing strength to cover over a desperate need to matter. He knew that geography intimately. The money you took, Jiho said. You gave it back? The first payment. Yes. They'd already acted. Okay. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to call the journalist who received the leak and tell them the full story. The contract, the evolution, the truth. You're not going to spin it. You're going to tell the truth, which is that 2 people entered an arrangement and ended up somewhere neither of them planned for. A pause. And then you're going to call your sister. Silence. She'll forgive me? Chidi's voice was very small. I don't know, Jiho said. But you'll have the chance to. Give her that. He hung up. The fourth call was to Daniel Shin, his business rival, the man who'd funded the hit. Jiho had known Shin since Seoul. They'd competed for the same university placement, the same first business deal, the same investor at 30. Shin was brilliant, well-funded, and had one weakness. He operated on the assumption that Jiho was always 3 moves behind. Jiho, Shin said, picking up with the ease of a man who thought he'd already won. I expected your lawyer. I don't send lawyers for personal conversations. Jiho's voice was very calm.
The leak failed. You know it failed because you're hearing my voice instead of reading about my deportation. A pause. Your source returned the money. The journalist you contacted is now being given a better story. And the Port Logistics Committee meets in 11 days. I've already been told informally that my application leads. Silence from Shinzent. You ran a play. Jiho continued. It's a reasonable play. I'd have considered it in your position. But here's the difference between us, Daniel. I stopped making decisions from fear 3 days ago. You haven't stopped yet. He paused. The Lagos port is large enough for 2 operators, if both are excellent. Come see me next week if you want to discuss a partnership. Don't if you don't. He let the pause breathe. Either way, I'm staying. He hung up. Adeze was standing in the hallway when he came out of his room. I could hear you from here, she said. The Shin call. How much? Enough. She tilted her head. A partnership? You'd actually consider it? It's good business. His logistics network in the Southwest would complement our northern infrastructure. He paused. I learned recently that 2 things can be competitors and complementary. It was a new concept for me. She looked at him. Was that a metaphor? I don't do metaphors. It was absolutely a metaphor. He almost smiled again, and this time he let it complete itself. It was a small smile, understated, the kind that probably didn't get deployed often, but it was real, and it was directed entirely at her, and Adeze decided it was one of the most affecting things she'd ever been on the receiving end of. The journalist publishes at 6 a.m., he said. Chidi gave them the full story. Our lawyer says the immigration review will likely close in our favor, given the cohabitation record. He paused. It's gonna be fine. You sure? I'm sure of the legal position. A pause. I'm less sure of everything else, but I've decided I'd rather be uncertain about the right things than certain about the wrong ones. Adeze crossed the hallway and stood directly in front of him. Jiho? She said. Yes? You said you wanted to make this real. I did. Then stop calculating outcomes and take my hand. He looked at her hand, looked at her face, and for the first time in the adult life of Kwon Jiho, a man who had optimized, strategized, and engineered every significant decision from a safe cognitive distance, he did something simply because it was right. He took her hand. I need to see everyone in the comments right now. What do we think about Chidi? Justice or grace? Stay tuned because the finale is next. The article published at 6:14 a.m. under the headline, Korean CEO, Lagos Architect, and the Contract Marriage That Became Real, a story Lagos didn't expect. Jiho read it standing in the kitchen. Adeze read it leaning against his shoulder, still in yesterday's clothes, tea going cold on the counter. The journalist, true to her word to Chidi, had told it straight. The contract, the terms, the immigration interview, the 5 days with Soon Yi, the balcony conversation that a source close to the couple described as the night something changed. It was honest, without being cruel. It was, Adeze thought, the kind of story that happened all the time and almost never got told. Source close to the couple, she read aloud. Who do you think? Soon Yi, they said simultaneously. Adeze laughed, the full one, the real one, head back, hand on his arm. Jiho watched her laugh and felt something in his chest that he now had a word for. He'd looked it up the night before, in a moment of privacy, the way a man confirmed something he already knew to be true. To love someone is to decide their existence makes the world architecturally sound. He hadn't found that exact definition anywhere. He thought he'd invented it, which seemed right. By noon, the story had 17,000 shares. By 3 p.m., Officer Balogun had personally called Jiho to inform him that the Immigration Compliance Unit had reviewed the evidence and found no grounds for fraud proceedings, noting specifically that the documented evolution of the relationship exceeded the threshold for what the law termed genuine marital intent. Genuine marital intent? Adeze repeated when he told her. She actually said that? Verbatim. Balagun is a poet disguised as a bureaucrat. I'm sending her a fruit basket. Don't send her a fruit basket. Send her pepper soup. She'd appreciate that more. Jiho made a note. Adase was very sure he would actually send the pepper soup. Chidi came on a Saturday. He arrived at the apartment door with no notice, which was on brand, and stood in the corridor looking like a man who had rehearsed several speeches and abandoned all of them on the elevator ride up west. Adase opened the door. They looked at each other for a long moment. I know, he said. I know, Ada. I know there's nothing that... Come inside, she said. He came inside. Jiho was in the kitchen. The two men looked at each other across the apartment with the particular assessment of men deciding whether they are enemies or not. Jiho nodded once. Chidi nodded back. It wasn't forgiveness. That would take time and work and several more difficult conversations. But it was the beginning of the decision to try. Adase made tea for 3. Too much condensed milk in hers. A normal amount in everyone else's. She set the cups down and sat between the two most complicated men in her life and said, "Nobody's going to speak for the first 5 minutes. Everyone is going to just sit with what they've done and what they want to do next." Jiho and Chidi both blinked at her. 5 minutes, she said. I am an architect. I understand foundations. You can't build on rubble. Sit. They sat. Sunyi arrived back in Lagos 3 weeks later. This time she called ahead. She still brought too much food. She stood in the apartment doorway and looked at it. Looked at the plant still positioned in front of the window, at the 2 coffee cups on the counter that told a story without meaning to, at the sketches of Adiese's current project pinned across the dining wall, and at Jiho standing in the kitchen without a jacket and without the specific set of his jaw that meant he was managing the room. I go, she said softly, in Korean. Adiese from the hallway answered, he's better. He eats now. Real meals. Sunyi spun around. Adiese stood there with the mildest possible expression. Jiho appeared from the kitchen. You knew she spoke Korean. I suspected, Sunyi said, pressing both hands to her mouth with eyes bright. How long? From the beginning, Adiese said in Korean, then smiled, switching to English. You called him a good boy on the phone. I felt that was important information. Jiho looked at his aunt, looked at his wife. Something moved across his face that Adese was now experienced enough to translate precisely. Helpless, genuine warmth. The kind he still hadn't fully learned to deliver without it arriving sideways. I hate both of you, he said. No, you don't, they said, simultaneously, in both languages. On the evening of the 6th month, the date the contract would have expired, Jiho did something he hadn't planned. He planned most things. This was different. He came to her studio corner, where she was sketching the elevation for a new project, a community health center in Enugu, the one she'd finally been able to fund properly after the firm stabilized. She was bent over the drafting table, in the pool of lamplight, pencil moving, the low soundtrack of Afrobeats barely audible. He sat on the second stool, without asking. She kept sketching. This, too, was language they'd developed, the ability to inhabit each other's silence without filling it. After a while, she said, without looking up, you know what today is? Yes. The contract is void. Technically. She looked up. Jiho, I want to stay. He said it simply, the way she'd said, you matter, without decoration, without clause. Not because immigration requires it, not because of the deal or the article or any of it. He held her gaze. Because you made me learn that the bravest thing a person can do isn't build walls. It's decide that someone is worth being seen by. She set the pencil down. You once told me, he continued, that you spent your whole life watching people love without being chosen. That you wanted to watch someone choose you freely. He paused. I'm choosing you
freely. Right now. And I'll choose it again tomorrow and the day after, without a contract and without a reason other than this. You are the most structurally sound person I have ever met, and you make everything around you architecturally better.
Adaize stared at him. Did you just propose to me using an architecture metaphor? I don't do metaphors. Jiho, it may have been a metaphor. She laughed, the real one, the whole one, and he let himself laugh too. Finally, fully, the laugh he'd been hoarding for 34 years. And it turned out it was worth the wait. She crossed the small distance between them. She took his face in both her hands. I understood everything you said, she told him. Every single word, from the beginning. And I stayed silent because I was waiting for you to say it out loud, out in the open, where it counted. She looked at him. Now you have. Now I have, he said. She kissed him. He kissed her back, like a man who had finally stopped calculating the risk. 6 weeks later, they filed new paperwork. Not a contract this time. Not a 6-month arrangement. The real thing. The permanent one. Officer Balagoon stamped it herself. She accepted the pepper soup. She said it was excellent. Some people fall in love like a strategy. Controlled, deliberate, exit clauses in place. And then they meet someone who changes the architecture of everything. Jiho entered Lagos with a contract and a plan. Adaize signed it with a secret and a prayer. Neither of them planned to stay. Both of them chose to. If this story kept you here till the very last line, you already know what to do. Like this video. It takes 2 seconds and it tells the algorithm this story deserved to be seen. Subscribe, because we have more Afro-Korean stories where this came from, and you do not want to be the person who finds us 3 seasons late. Comment below, Team She Should Have Told Him Sooner, or Team The Silence Was the Right Move. I need to see the debate in the comments right now. And share this with one person who needs to believe that some people really do choose each other freely. We'll see you in the next one.